My name is Jason Briggs. I'm 41 years old, and I've attended exactly one black tie industry gala in my life. I walked out before they cut the ribbon. I walked out with my father, and I didn't know yet that by the time the valets were pulling cars around out front, most of the people still inside would be quietly searching his name on their phones. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this actually started. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee. Not the Nashville that ends up in travel magazines. Clarksville is 45 minutes up I-24, a mid-sized city built around Fort Campbell, and the people who work and live near it. Modest, practical. Not a place that asks much of you, and not a place that pretends to be something it isn't. I always respected that about it. Our house on Mercer Lane was a single-story brick ranch with a carport and a vegetable garden in the back that my father kept going from April through October. Nothing about the outside of that house said anything in particular to anyone. That was fine by him. My father's name is Earl Briggs. He's 67 now, and still wakes up before 5 most mornings out of pure habit. He drove an F-250 for over 20 years, the same truck, gray, with a rust patch above the passenger side wheel, well, that he always said he'd get around to fixing and never did. He wore flannel in the cool months and whatever was clean in the summer. He read a physical newspaper every morning at the kitchen table. Actual print, actual paper. Subscribed until the local paper made it genuinely difficult to do so. He was not a man who talked much. When he did, it was worth hearing. When he didn't, the silence was comfortable, the kind of quiet you stop noticing when you've been around someone long enough to understand what they're not saying. There's a moment I've thought about a lot since everything happened. When I was about 19, a regional business magazine sent him a letter asking to feature him in a profile. I saw the envelope on the kitchen counter. Nice letterhead, the kind of thing you'd normally take seriously. He read it, set it down, and I found it in the recycling bin a week later. No notes, no callback, nothing. When I asked him about it, he said, "I don't need that, son." End of conversation. There was also an old leather briefcase, dark brown, worn at the corners, that sat on the top shelf of the hall closet. I watched it come down maybe 5 or 6 times across my entire childhood. He never opened it in front of me. I never asked. I thought I understood him well enough to know what mattered to him. I was wrong. Or rather, I understood the shape of him without understanding the full picture. Those are different things. I met Nicole at a conference in Nashville 3 years ago. I was doing project management for a civil engineering firm by then. She worked in marketing for a commercial real estate company. She was sharp, the kind of person who could read the dynamics of any room in under 2 minutes and adjust accordingly. We had dinner twice before I was honest with myself about wanting a third. For almost a year, things were uncomplicated in the way they can be when 2 people genuinely enjoy being around each other. Then I met her family. The Whitfields lived in Brentwood. If you're from Middle Tennessee, you know what that means. Her father, Victor, ran a commercial real estate development company that had been operating in Nashville since before I was born. Her mother, Harriet, served on 2 charitable boards, organized fundraisers, and managed an enormous amount of their family's social life. She was good at it. She was good at almost everything she did, including the particular art of saying something that sounded like a compliment, until you were alone in the car afterward, sitting with it. The first time they met my father was at a dinner Nicole put together downtown. My parents drove up from Clarksville. My father wore slacks and a button-down and shook Victor's hand and said it was good to meet him. Victor asked what my father did. My father said he was retired. Victor asked from what. My father said he'd run a small supply business. Victor nodded once and turned to ask Nicole about a restaurant they'd been to in Asheville. 45 seconds, then done. Over the next several months, Harriet developed what I can only describe as a talent for small public diminishments. She had a way of introducing my parents to people that carried its own built-in verdict. Jason's parents, they're from Clarksville, very salt of the earth. Warm voice, genuine-looking smile. She probably thought it was kind. I watched my father register it with the same expression he wore when reading about city council decisions. Attentive, unimpressed, undisturbed. If you've ever sat at a table and felt someone you love being spoken about in that particular way, not addressed, just described, I want to hear about it. Drop your city and the time where you are in the comments. I read every single one. I talked to Nicole directly about it. I told her I needed her to step in if her mother kept framing my father as some kind of well-meaning rustic. She said she would handle it. She said it while looking at the kitchen counter, not at me. I let it go because I wanted to believe the words more than I trusted the posture. That was my mistake. Some promises are answers you want to hear before you've asked the right question. Victor's company was turning 25 years old that October. His industry association put together a recognition gala at the Omni downtown. 250 guests, gold centerpieces, four-course dinner, the kind of event where the program is printed on heavy cardstock and handed to you at the door by someone in a blazer. They were honoring Victor with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Nicole asked if I'd bring my parents. I said I would. My father pressed his own suit the morning of navy blue, kept in a garment bag, at the back of his closet. He polished his shoes at the kitchen table, using a kit he'd owned for at least 15 years. He looked good, not like a man performing something, like a man who had simply decided this was the occasion for the navy suit, so that's what he wore. When we arrived at the hotel, I found out where my parents had been seated. Table 14. Near the back of the room, partially behind one of the support columns. You could see the stage from there, more or less. People on the stage couldn't easily see you. The Whitfields were at the head table near the front. I noted all of this. I kept walking. Somewhere during cocktail hour, I noticed a man near the bar watching my father, mid-50s, well-dressed in the way that comes from having made real decisions for a long time. He looked at my father, took out his phone, then put it back. He started to move in my father's direction, then stopped himself. He stayed where he was. I made a mental note and didn't know yet what to do with it. The dinner passed. Victor gave a speech about building the company, the city, the people he'd worked alongside. He mentioned me once. Nicole's Jason, a real go-getter. The way certain men acknowledge people when they want credit for being generous without actually being generous. There was polite applause. Then Harriet took the mic. She was warm. She was always warm. She thanked the room, said several genuinely nice things about Victor, talked about what the milestone meant. Then she turned slightly toward the back of the room and said, I also want to acknowledge the families with us tonight. Jason's parents made the drive up from Clarksville and we are so grateful. She smiled toward table 14. His father is a working man, a simple man, a handyman really, but they raised a wonderful son, said with complete warmth. The tone of someone doing something charitable. A few people at nearby tables nodded, a few smiled. I turned to Nicole, standing 2 feet to my left. She was looking at her champagne glass. Then she felt me looking. She glanced up, and at the corner of her mouth, small, involuntary, there for half a second and then gone, something flickered. Not cruelty. Relief. The expression of someone whose tension has finally found a release, even if the way it released was wrong. She looked away immediately. I set my champagne down on the table. I stood up. 250 people in a ballroom go very quiet when one person gets up and walks toward the front during a toast. You can feel the room deciding what to make of it. Harriet still had the mic when I reached her. She held it out because the moment required it. I took it. I turned and faced the room. Thank you all for being here tonight, I said. I mean that sincerely. The room was still. The man your host just called a handyman drove up from Clarksville today. He pressed his own suit this morning. He's been sitting at table 14 all night, behind the column, with a partial view of the stage, without saying a word to anyone about it. I paused, long enough for the silence to have its own shape. I'm going to leave now, not because I'm angry, because I know exactly who my father is, and I'm not going to stand here while someone tells 250 people who he isn't. I set the mic back on the stand. I walked to table 14. My father was already on his feet. He'd stood without any drama. No chair shoved back, no announcement. He straightened his jacket. His face was what it always was. Open, unhurried, the same expression he'd worn reading the newspaper at the kitchen table for the past 40 years. I looked at him. Ready, Dad? He held my eyes for a moment. Then he said 4 words quietly. No performance in them at all. I raised you right. That was it. Said the way he said everything, like a fact that didn't require anyone's agreement to remain true. My mother picked up her purse. We walked to the exit. The whole room watched us go. Nobody said a word until we were through the doors. In the lobby, we stood near the elevators. The sounds from the gala came muffled through the closed double doors. Nobody was talking yet. Then, quick footsteps on the marble behind us. We turned. It was the man from the bar. He was slightly out of breath, the way someone gets when they've made a decision, and moved on it fast. He looked at my father. Earl Briggs? My father looked at him the way he looked at everything, taking it in, giving nothing back yet. Paul, he said. They knew each other. The man, Paul Drummond, looked at me briefly, then back at my father. I've been on your fund's advisory board for 3 years, he said. I didn't put it together until I saw you come in tonight. I didn't know that was your son. A pause. I'm sorry about what happened in there. This is my son, Jason, my father said. Paul extended his hand. I shook it. He told me he was a managing partner at an investment firm based in Atlanta. He told me my father was one of their largest silent limited partners. He said the number, north of 200 million in positions across 3 of their funds. I didn't say anything. I'm not entirely sure what my face was doing. Paul excused himself a few minutes later. He had a client still inside. He shook my father's hand again and said he'd be in touch. And then it was just the 3 of us. My father told me everything that night, sitting in a quiet corner of the lobby while the city moved past the windows outside. He'd started Briggs Industrial Supply in 1991, a rented warehouse on the edge of Clarksville, a used forklift, 2 manufacturer contracts he'd gotten by showing up in person. He ran it for 26 years without press, without profiles, without any of the industry recognition events that other people built their identities around. In 2017, he sold to a logistic conglomerate. He told me the number once, clearly, because he said I was his son and had the right to know. $340 million. He'd invested quietly through several funds since then. Paul Drummond's was one of them. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. He took a moment, not looking for the words, giving them room. I wanted to see who you'd become without it, he said. A man should build himself on what he is, not on what his father has. He looked at me steadily. I have my answer now, he said. Nicole found me in the lobby about 40 minutes later. She'd been crying. She sat down across from me and said she hadn't known her mother was going to say that. I told her I believed her. I'm not her, she said. I want you to understand that. Nicole, I said, you laughed. She started to explain it, a reflex nerves. It didn't mean what it looked like. I stopped her. I know what kind of laugh it was, I said. It wasn't mean. You were relieved. Something finally got said out loud, even if the way it got said was ugly. That's the part I can't get past. She didn't argue with it. That told me what I needed to know. I asked you 8 months ago to handle this, I said. You promised me you would. Tonight your mother called my father a handyman into a live microphone in front of 250 people, and you looked at your champagne glass. Silence. I don't think you're a bad person, I said. I think you're someone who will always choose her family when it matters most. I can't build a life with someone who looks at my father the way yours does. She didn't have an answer. We sat in the lobby quiet for a while. Take care of yourself, I said. I meant it completely. I went upstairs and sat with my father and watched a fishing program on low volume until midnight. We didn't talk much. It was enough. In the weeks that followed, certain things happened at a distance. Victor had been in early conversations with an Atlanta investments about a mixed-use development on the east side of the city. Significant financing involved, a deal he'd been working toward for months. After the gala, the calls from that group went quiet, then stopped. His contact there had moved into a new role. The replacement was courteous and very unavailable. The project entered a review period with no defined end date. Harriet was asked that November to step down from the advisory board of a local arts foundation she'd served on for years. She was told the board structure was being reorganized. No one mentioned that the foundation's largest anonymous donor had quietly expressed some concerns about the current advisory composition. I don't know for certain that any of this connected back to my father. That's the nature of Earl Briggs. He doesn't move visibly. He simply exists in certain spaces, and those spaces carry weight. What flows from that isn't something he plans. It's the result of being who he is for long enough that the world has quietly reorganized itself around him, without needing to announce it. I called about a project lead position in Denver that I'd passed on earlier in the year. Infrastructure work across the Mountain West. The kind of role I'd been working toward for a long time. The hiring manager said it was still available. I took it. My father flew out in March. He didn't ask. He told me he'd be there on the 15th, and could I confirm the airport situation? I confirmed it. He showed up in his flannel jacket and his good boots. He looked around my apartment, looked at the windows, and said, "Good light." That was the full review. We drove out toward Red Rocks that afternoon and walked some of the trails near the amphitheater, cold and clear the way Colorado gets in early spring. Sky a deep, even blue, the red formations carrying their own particular silence. We walked mostly without talking. The quiet was the kind you earn. At some point, I asked him the thing I'd been sitting with since October. "You built something that size," I said, and never said a word, not to me, not to anyone. He walked a few paces before answering. He wasn't searching for words, he was just giving them room. "Didn't need to," he said. I've thought about that a lot since. About a man who had the means to change every surface of his life. The house, the truck, the zip code, all of it, and felt no pull toward any of it. About the leather briefcase in the hall closet, which turned out to contain old partnership documents from the early years of the company. He'd kept them because they reminded him where things started. Not to show anyone. There was nobody he needed to show. I thought about the woman with the warm voice and the practiced smile, who had looked at my father and seen a handyman. About table 14 and the column and the partial view of the stage. And I thought about what he said when I walked to his table that night, already standing, jacket straight, face steady, no drama and no announcement. Just a man who had decided, long before that room made its move, that other people's smallness was not something that required his response. 4 words, said plainly. If you've ever had to choose between protecting someone who raised you and keeping the peace in a room full of people who had already decided what you were worth, I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments. You don't have to carry that by yourself. I'm still learning to move through the world the way my father does, without needing the room's understanding before you know your own value. He has been teaching me that my entire life, long before I knew he was doing it. I think that's the whole point. And standing in that lobby in October, watching him look at Paul Drummond with the same unhurried calm he brought to everything, I finally understood that the most important thing my father ever built wasn't a company. It was the kind of man who walks out of a room like that and never once looks back to see if anyone noticed.